There is something about Maurice Sam and Sonia Uche that continues to keep people talking, even when neither of them is saying much. And that is exactly what makes this particular situation interesting, because lately the conversation has not necessarily been about one big announcement, one dramatic post, or one obvious statement. Instead, it is about the silence. Maurice Sam has been relatively quiet, and whenever someone who is normally visible suddenly becomes less expressive, people naturally begin to wonder what could be happening behind the scenes. And somehow, every time Maurice becomes quiet, Sonia Uche's name finds its way back into the conversation. Now, before we go any further, it is important to make one thing clear. There is no confirmed announcement that Maurice Sam and Sonia Uche are in a romantic relationship. But entertainment conversations are not always created by official announcements. Sometimes they come from repeated appearances, chemistry on screen, interactions, timing, and the way two celebrities seem to naturally attract attention whenever their names are mentioned together. And that is where this whole Maurice Sam and Sonia Uche conversation becomes interesting. Because even when Maurice is not saying anything, people are still looking at the connection. So the big question is, why does the conversation keep coming back to Maurice Sam and Sonia Uche? Let's break everything down. First, there is the silence. One of the biggest things people have noticed is Maurice Sam's quieter presence. When an actor becomes less vocal online, there can be 100 different explanations. Maybe he is concentrating on work. Maybe he is simply taking a break from social media. Maybe there are projects he cannot talk about yet. Or maybe he has just decided that not everything needs to be shared publicly. But once people are already interested in a particular celebrity, silence can become a story of its own. And that is exactly what seems to be happening here. Instead of people simply saying, Maurice is quiet, the conversation starts becoming, why is Maurice quiet? And once that question enters the room, people start looking at everything else around him. What has he posted? What has he not posted? Who has he been appearing with? Which projects is he involved in? And most importantly, what is happening with the people he is frequently associated with on screen? That is where Sonia Uche comes in. Then there is Sonia Uche. Sonia Uche has become one of those actresses whose on-screen pairings can easily become a major talking point. She has worked with different actors, played different characters, and appeared in different kinds of stories. But whenever Maurice Sam enters the picture, the conversation seems to take a different direction. People start looking beyond the actual storyline. They start examining their chemistry, their expressions, their interactions, the way their characters respond to each other. And sometimes, even the smallest moment can generate a huge conversation. That does not necessarily mean there is something romantic happening in real life. Actors are professionals. A convincing connection on screen is part of what makes a movie enjoyable. But the reason this particular pairing continues to attract attention is because the chemistry is easy for viewers to notice. And once viewers notice something like that, they remember it. The interesting part is the repeated connection. One isolated appearance between two actors is one thing. But when people repeatedly see the same two names appearing together in different conversations, different projects, or different pieces of entertainment content, the association becomes stronger. Maurice Sam, Sonia Uche, Maurice Sam. And then suddenly people begin wondering whether there is more to the story. Again, that is speculation, not confirmation, but it explains why the conversation refuses to disappear. The interesting thing is that neither person needs to make a huge statement for people to start talking. Sometimes, the absence of a statement becomes enough to keep curiosity alive. And then Bryan OkWara enters the conversation. This is where things become even more interesting, because Sonia Uche has also been associated with Bryan Okawara in entertainment conversations and movie content. And that creates another comparison. Maurice Sam on one side, Bryan Okawara on the other, and Sonia Uche right in the middle of the conversation. Now nobody needs to turn this into a real-life love triangle because there is no confirmed evidence that such a triangle exists. But from a content perspective, the comparison is fascinating. Why? Because viewers can compare the different screen dynamics. Maurice and Sonia have one kind of chemistry, Bryan and Sonia have another. And when people see different pairings, they naturally begin asking which combination feels more convincing. That is normal entertainment discussion. But Maurice's quietness makes the whole thing even more intriguing. Why does his silence make people more curious? Think about it. If Maurice were constantly posting, constantly explaining himself, and constantly talking about everything happening around him, there would probably be less mystery. People would have more information. But when someone becomes quiet, there is more room for interpretation. And that is what is happening. Every little appearance becomes more noticeable. Every interaction becomes more interesting. Every new project gets examined more closely. And suddenly, something that might normally pass unnoticed becomes a talking point. That is the power of mystery. Eyes people are also looking at the chemistry. One of the biggest reasons Maurice and Sonia continue to attract attention is their chemistry. When two actors work well together, you can usually tell. Their scenes feel natural, their reactions feel believable, their conversations flow, and sometimes they do not even need to say much. A simple look can communicate something, a pause can make a scene more interesting, a smile can completely change the mood. That is the kind of chemistry audiences remember. And Maurice and Sonia have created enough memorable screen moments for people to keep bringing the pairing up. But again, chemistry on screen should not automatically be interpreted as a real-life relationship. That distinction is important. The internet also loves a mystery. There is another reason this story keeps getting attention. People love unanswered questions. If everything is completely obvious, the conversation eventually dies. But if there is uncertainty, people keep watching, they keep analyzing, they keep asking questions, and Maurice's quieter presence creates exactly that kind of uncertainty. Nobody has a confirmed explanation for every detail, so people fill in the blanks with their own interpretations. One person sees nothing unusual, another person notices the chemistry, someone else notices a particular interaction, another person compares Maurice with Brian, and suddenly, one simple situation becomes a full entertainment conversation. But what could Maurice actually be doing? There are several perfectly normal explanations. First, he could simply be focused on his career. Actors often disappear from social media when they are working on projects. Sometimes they are filming, sometimes they are preparing for roles, sometimes they are traveling, and sometimes they just want privacy. Another possibility is that Maurice has simply become more selective about what he shares. Not every celebrity wants their entire life displayed online. And honestly, sometimes staying quiet is the smartest thing to do. The less you explain, the less people can twist. But ironically, that same silence can make people even more curious. And that brings us back to Sonia. Whenever Maurice's name is mentioned alongside Sonia, the conversation seems to become more intense. Why? Because people already recognize the pairing. There is familiarity, there is history in terms of their on-screen appearances, and there is a certain expectation that whenever they appear together, something interesting might happen. That does not mean something dramatic is happening behind the scenes. It simply means the audience has become invested in their screen dynamic. And that is a powerful thing for actors. When viewers become interested in a pairing, they start paying attention to even the smallest details. So is Maurice really hiding something? That is the question people keep asking. But the honest answer is, we don't know. There has been no confirmed evidence that Maurice Sam is deliberately hiding a relationship with Sonia Uche. There has also been no official confirmation that their relationship goes beyond professional friendship or co-star chemistry, so it would be unfair to present speculation as fact. However, the fact that people continue asking questions is itself interesting. It shows just how much attention their pairing has generated, and sometimes that is the real story, not whether they are secretly together, but why people keep believing there might be something worth talking about. What about Sonia's side? Another reason the conversation continues is because Sonia Uche remains active in the entertainment space. She continues to work, appear in productions, and interact with different people in the industry. That means viewers get to see her alongside different actors, and when she appears with Maurice, people naturally compare the chemistry. When she appears with Brian, they compare that too. So instead of looking at one relationship, people are really comparing different screen partnerships. And that makes the conversation much bigger. Maurice vs Brian. The comparison. This is probably one of the most interesting angles. Maurice Sam and Brian Okwara are both established actors, but they bring different energies to the screen. Maurice often has a certain youthful, expressive energy. Brian has a different kind of presence, more mature and composed. And Sonia can create a different dynamic with each actor. So when viewers watch these pairings, they naturally have preferences. Some may prefer Maurice and Sonia, others may prefer Brian and Sonia, and some may simply enjoy watching Sonia work with both actors. That is what makes this such an easy conversation to build around. But there is one thing people should not do. People should not turn entertainment speculation into accusations. There is a huge difference between saying, "These two have great chemistry," and saying, "These two are secretly dating." First is an observation about their work, the second is a claim about their private lives. Unless the people involved confirm something themselves, it should remain speculation. And that actually makes the story more interesting, because we can focus on what is visible rather than inventing what is not. So what are people really watching? At this point, people are watching for the next move. Will Maurice become more active again? Will Sonia and Maurice appear together in another project? Will Brian Okwara and Sonia Uche continue their own screen partnership? Will Maurice post something that changes the conversation, or will everything simply continue normally? Those are the questions keeping the story alive. And sometimes the next small development is all it takes: one new picture, one movie announcement, one behind-the-scenes moment, one interview, one unexpected collaboration. And suddenly everybody is talking again. Fire the bigger picture. The Maurice Sam and Sonia Uche conversation is not necessarily about a secret relationship. It is about how entertainment works. Actors build chemistry, audiences connect with that chemistry, certain pairings become memorable. And once a pairing becomes memorable, people want to see more. Maurice's quieter period only adds another layer of curiosity, because when someone is visible, people see what they are doing. When someone becomes quiet, people start wondering what they are doing. That is the difference. And right now that mystery is helping keep Maurice's name in the conversation. Final thought: maybe there is nothing dramatic happening. Maybe Maurice Sam is simply focusing on work. Maybe Sonia Uche is simply doing what she has always done, building her career and taking on new roles. Maybe the chemistry people notice is exactly what it looks like: two actors who work well together. Or maybe there are details that the public simply does not know. Until either of them says something themselves, nobody can honestly claim to know the full story. But one thing is obvious: the Maurice Sam and Sonia Uche conversation is not disappearing anytime soon. And Maurice's silence may actually be one of the reasons people are paying even more attention. Because sometimes, the loudest thing a celebrity can do is say nothing at all. And now the real question is, what happens the next time Maurice Sam and Sonia Uche appear together? Because if that happens, you can almost guarantee that people will be watching every little detail. And if Brian Okwara is involved too, well, that conversation could become even more interesting. Eyes fire.